Welcome back to On Texas Football. I'm Jeff Howe, joined by CJ Vogel. It's time for another edition of Longhorn Weekly, and this one's brought to you by Bluebird Organizing. We'll tell you more about Perry and Bluebird Organizing later in the show. To start it off, CJ, one of the things last week, and this will be kind of our recap and look ahead portion because it's all in one, really. One of the things last week that got kind of the college football world up in arms is how much is Texas spending on the 2025 roster? The report came out in the Houston Chronicle that it's upwards of 35 to 40 million. Some people, there were reports that tried to debunk that. You had a report on it at On Texas Football on Friday. So I want to know what you heard after digging into it. What do you think realistically Texas is spending on this football roster?
Yeah, it was a pretty big storyline, to come out last week. That's a big number, and I think it's a big story, one, because it's Texas, and two, because it's a number that maybe we hadn't necessarily heard in the world of college football just yet. Not to say it's not going to be the norm and it won't be this year or anything like that, but look, $35 to $40 million, that's a big chunk of change, and that's what was in the report of the Houston Chronicle. I'm told it's not as much as that $35 to $40 million range. It's not too far off, but it's not there yet. But what's interesting, Jeff, is, you start looking at where these big schools are at, right? Ohio State just won the national championship. Georgia's going to be in the vicinity. Clemson now starting to hold on to a lot of its top talent as well. But the Ole Misses, the Texas Techs of the world, these schools that are uber aggressive, LSU in this cycle, really aggressive in the portal, hey, it's going to take a good chunk of change to compete at a national level. So, yes, I do think Texas is going to maintain that level of aggression. But, no, it's not yet at $40 million, I think. And right now, again, with where things are going, you have to be aggressive ahead of the House settlement decision. When things are going to change, if you're a team with a competitive roster, to get over that hump, this is the time to do it.
You made a great point in your piece over at OTF. You look at the positions Texas attacked in the portal, namely interior defensive linemen.
Right.
We know that position carries a hefty price tag. Now, there are various levels of price tag. For example, when Walter Nolan entered the portal a couple of years ago, there was only a very select few schools that could afford that NIL bag. But whether it's one big bag, CJ, or 5 or 6 small bags, you look at adding Murad Watson and Levon Johnson to Cole Brevard and Travis Shaw and Hero Canoe. That's 5 interior defensive linemen. And like you said, the big thing we keep talking about here on the channel, we keep talking about it on the website, all of these deals before the House settlement is finalized, those deals are going to be heavily front-loaded. So I don't think it would shock anybody. It should shock anybody if not just Texas, but several schools go past that number, that $24 million number that Ohio State had last year.
Yeah, 100%. Look, if you talk about premium positions, you get your tackles on the offense side of the ball and you get interior big guys up front. Texas just added 5 to your point. On top of that, they just added a transfer quarterback. So another premium position. And I like the idea of going out and adding the transfer quarterback as well out of Troy. Problem is, hey, it's going to run up a pretty hefty tab. Now, of course, Texas in a position to play that game, to pay the premium price and make sure that your roster maintains its longevity, even with an injury or two. And getting a guy with experience is, of course, important, Jeff. You put a lot of money into an investment. You want to make sure that it's insured, right? You go buy a Lamborghini, you got to have insurance. Texas has a Lamborghini right now with Arch Manning. You got to make sure that there's a backup plan or a contingency in place should he miss a few games. But, yeah, that just adds to this price of the roster this year, not to mention, 3 All-Americans on the defensive side of the ball that you're working to maintain. So it's, of course, something that's going to run up. The big issue I have with that price leaking out now is, you go win a national championship. Well, everybody's going to point, yeah, you have the most expensive roster in college football. Well, you developed, about 85% of that roster?
Yeah.
You lose with that roster, and regardless of who you play or how the game ends, well, now you just lost with the most expensive roster. So I'm sure for Texas, they would have loved for this number to have never been leaked. I'm sure for Texas fans, it's going to be a bit of an annoyance to hear about the entire season as well, regardless of what happens on the road in Columbus, Athens, or the Swamp. it's either going to diminish some of the success or it's going to, again, kind of just slap you in the face if you lose. So it's a bit unfortunate, but of course that's where college football is. And I can tell you there are not many schools far off from this number as well.
Yeah, CJ, I think anybody that's any Texas fan that's trying to, I guess, come to grips with it, for lack of a better term, if you want to know how to handle it, just think of it like a Major League Baseball team, because at this point there's not a salary cap for NIL structures. Now, there is a salary cap in terms of the money isn't unlimited, but in terms of like a hard cap, there's not one. Think of it more like a Major League Baseball team that has a high payroll, but it's not like they went on a free agent spending spree. A lot of that roster will have been put together through the farm system, and contracts come due. You just have to pay some guys. So, CJ, I don't know if that's going to help Texas fans rationalize it. And to tell you the truth, I don't know why they need to rationalize it. I even said it when A&M put together their 2022 class. You know what? These are the rules we're playing with. And they might not be fair to everybody. It's like my late father used to tell me all the time, life ain't fair. So I'm not going to fault Texas. I continue to find hilarity in the fact that for years and years and years, everybody on the outside made fun of Texas. Like, you guys have all this money and all these resources, and you can't win football games. And now that Texas is using their resources, well, it's not fair. You've got all this money. You've got all these resources. Why are you using them? So you can't win. It's a no-win situation, but I just like the fact that Sark and the staff and this organization continue to put together a competitive roster. And CJ, you mentioned Matthew Caldwell, and we've had at this point, at the time we're recording this, about 36 or so hours to really digest this edition. And one thing I think needs to be made clear, I don't think this is an indication of how the staff feels or doesn't feel about Trey Owens or KJ Lacey. This is and you have to find the right guy who's willing to come into your program and do this. This is if we have a worst case scenario in the middle of a game and you're on the road, say in Gainesville, that first SEC game, you'd rather have a veteran quarterback that's at least been on the field for some high leverage snaps, get you through a quarter or a series or a game or whatever it is, rather than just, handing the keys to Trey Owens or KJ Lacey and wishing them the best of luck.
Yeah, 100%. Look, we've talked about it at a number of positions already on the offensive side of the ball, Jeff. At wide receiver, you went through a spring where there were no career receptions with no Wingo, no more. Tight end, very much a similar situation with Spencer Shannon, Jordan Washington, Amari Winston kind of being the three. Of course, Texas gone out, both positions, added somebody there. Quarterback is no different. And yes, Arch Manning has had 2 games as a starting quarterback. He's played in some high leverage situations, both against Ohio State, both against Texas A&M as well. But to your point behind that, it's still a bit of an unknown. Trey Owens, only 4 career passes. He has 2 completions. KJ Lacey in his first career spring as a Texas Longhorn as well. To go out, get a guy who's been through 4 years of college football, entering year 5, over 1,000 snaps in his career as well. He was a player of the week for the Sun Belt as well for Troy. Look, this is a guy that's been there and done that sort of say, ready about 7-8 starts last year for Troy. It just gives you that sense of, okay, should something happen to Arch Manning here, I don't need to throw out a completely brand new look, right? It's going to be a guy that's played in front of a number of thousands fans before, been on the road in some key situations, played in pressure as well. So, of course, we know that Arch Manning jobs is safe. And I'm with you. I don't really think that this is indicative one way or the other of Trey Owens. I heard that he had a solid spring, just stepping up in terms of what's next for him and his development is where this spring really focused on.
No, you're absolutely right. And we heard not just Trey Owens making strides this spring, but we saw it a little bit, heard about it. Sark talked about it. I think they feel like they made the right call getting KJ Lacey. And, hey, it's just one of those years where you don't have an experienced quarterback behind your starter. You just want some insurance. And keep in mind, I will continue to say this, CJ, till I'm blue in the face. Every year, Steve Sarkisian has been at Texas. The backup quarterback has had to start at least 2 games. The guy that started the year as the backup has had to start at least 2 games. So we hope if it's a 17-game season, everybody watching this, everybody on the OTF staff, we all hope Arch Manning is starting each one of those 17 games and finishing each one of those 17 games.
Right.
But just in case. This is a we'll call this a CYA take out of the portal, CJ. Real quick before we get into our sponsor for this week, one spot left. Texas has one scholarship spot left. What are you using that for? If you're Sark, are you still looking for a possible return guy, or are you even trying to actively fill it at this point?
Yeah, that's really interesting because I think going quarterback to fill spot number 84 was a spot that no one really expected. Mm-hmm. But, it makes sense. You only had 3 scholarship quarterbacks before. The 2 guys behind Arch who already had limited starting, and playing experience had virtually none. So it makes sense to go get a guy who's done it in its own sense. I still kind of look around and say, okay, feel good about running back, feel good about receiver, tight end, you already addressed. Haven't addressed offensive line, and you haven't yet. Will that be a spot that they go to? Because I like the tackle spots. We've talked about the athleticism this year, but it's an unknown so far on that interior. Is there somebody that can push the trio on the inside, or is there a guy that maybe you can find late in this transfer portal cycle to supplant them? We'll have to wait and see. But everywhere else, feel really good about the defensive line. We know edge is a strong room as well. Linebacker, corner, safety. I feel like Texas is in good shape there. Cornerback might be the only other position I look at and say, okay, you just don't know what you have with a Jalen Gilbo or Kobe Black in a full-term situation opposite of Manny Muhammad. So cornerback, offensive line, if you have to spend it, that's where I look.
And, I keep going back to return specialist, but I'll go back to something you reported towards the end of spring practice. Warren Roberson and Ryan Niblett were both getting some action in the return game. I think those young wide receivers could also be possibilities as returners. We know DeAndre Moore has a little bit of return experience. Do you throw a guy like Ryan Wingo out there? I think that's going to be one of those hot button questions for us this summer is Ryan Wingo too valuable to have him on returns if, in fact, you feel like he can do some of that? So, look, Xavier Worthy didn't return punts in high school. Sark threw him out there, and he ended up leaving Texas as an All-American punt returner. So, yeah. I don't know. That's why Sark makes the money he does and has the job he does, and why we're sitting here talking about it on the On Texas Football YouTube channel. But at any rate, we'll see if Texas fills spot number 85 for the 2025 season. Right now, I want to tell you about our sponsor for today's episode of On Texas Football. This edition of Longhorn Weekly is brought to you by Bluebird Organizing. Is your wife feeling overwhelmed? Does she constantly mention how she wishes she could find items more easily? Or how she wants to park her car in the garage, but there's no space? Or maybe she complains about tripping all over the kids' toys. Are you, as her husband, feeling at a complete loss as to how you can help? Well, spring cleaning on its way and Mother's Day coming up this weekend. You can give your wife the gift of a lifetime with a customized organizing session from Bluebird Organizing. Perry, she owns Bluebird Organizing. She'll come into your space without judgment and give your wife the organized kitchen or closet or playroom or garage of her dreams. Plus, whenever you're done, she'll take all the donations for you. So that's going to leave you and your family ready to enjoy the new space. It's time to give your wife a gift she'll love for years to come. Call or text 737-346-7779 to book your free in-person consultation today. Again, that's 737-346-7779. And we want to thank Perry and Bluebird Organizing for sponsoring this edition of Longhorn Weekly. CJ, the Texas baseball team, a weekend to forget, getting swept in Fayetteville. Maybe the baseball gods just decided, look, good fortune has been on your side, and we're just going to dump buckets of rain on you just for one weekend and get all of it out of the way. It sure felt like it. Uncharacteristic mistakes by the pitching staff. The bats got hot on Saturday, not so much the case on Thursday or Friday. But, CJ, they need to shake it off because you look at the schedule this week, you've got your last midweek game against Lamar, which is a pretty decent team. When you that Southland Conference has been competitive this year, and that's a top 100 RPI team coming in on Tuesday, and you've got a red hot Florida team coming in for a Friday through Sunday series. Not a lot of time to, CJ, as one of my high school football coaches love to say, sit there, suck on your bottom lip, and feel sorry for yourself. They got to pick themselves back up and get ready for a big week of baseball over at the Dish.
Yeah, they do. Unfortunately, there's still a 2-game lead in the SEC standings. So you just lost 3 straight, but it felt like everybody else at the top of the SEC conference did as well. And I know that Arkansas is very much in the mix there, but for Texas with 6 conference games remaining, still in a pretty good spot when it comes to the regular season SEC title. And I think that's more than just about what anybody could have asked for coming into this season. So, yeah, that trip to Fayetteville, I know Texas fans probably won't see any plays, any moments from that on the highlight reel come the end of the season, but I do think it's one of those valuable, experiences to go up there, kind of get your teeth kicked in and know, okay, now we got to reset, regroup, come back down to Austin and figure out what went wrong moving forward. And of course, look, Oklahoma, Florida, you mentioned, Jeff, two teams that are going to be playing postseason baseball, two teams that Texas might have to face in the SEC tournament as well. I think this will be a strong finish to the season, but ultimately it's in a way surprising that it's taken this long in the SEC for Texas to kind of, get their business handled a little bit. You know what I mean? So all in all, it is baseball. It is life in the SEC. It was an unfortunate weekend, but Texas, again, sitting pretty nicely currently with about 6 games left in SEC ball.
And it's interesting, CJ. People will look at a number of different polls, but I choose to follow Kendall Rogers and the crew at d1baseball.com. Texas still number 1 in the country, even after getting swept. Arkansas does move up 4 spots to number 7. LSU at number 3. That is a massive series this weekend. If you look at SEC series, Arkansas and LSU locking up. Arkansas coming off the sweep of Texas. LSU coming off of a road weekend series loss to Texas A&M in College Station. So as it turns out, CJ, if Texas is going to win the SEC, yes, the Longhorns have to take care of their business, but they're going to need some help from the Bayou Bengals to knock off Arkansas a couple of times. So it's that time of year. Postseason's getting ready to heat up, and it's already heating up in softball. Congratulations to Mike White and the Texas softball team. Get the number 3 seed in the SEC tournament. They will get started because they get the double bye by finishing as one of the top 4 seeds. They don't play, CJ, until Thursday, 4 o'clock on the SEC network. And we don't know right now who they're going to play. It could be Florida, it could be Ole Miss, or it could be Missouri. I know the series sweep in Norman at the hands of Oklahoma wasn't good, but they picked themselves back up. Really nice outing over Kentucky in the regular season finale. So best of luck to Mike White and the Texas softball team coming up this week in the SEC tournament in Athens. All right, CJ, thank you for the knowledge and expertise as always. Thank you to Matthew and everybody behind the scenes, the entire On Texas Football staff. Don't forget, get over to ontexasfootball.com. If you're not a member, sign up right now. We'll get you 1 year of access for $49.95 by using the promo code OTFOG. Just enter that promo code OTFOG. That's 1 year at ontexasfootball.com for $49.95. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you're not already. If you are subscribed, thank you so much for your support. We're over 80,000 subscribers and going strong. So thanks to you, the viewer and the listener. We would not be here if it weren't for you. So thank you for your continued support of what we're doing at On Texas Football. That's going to do it for this edition of Longhorn Weekly. Again, I want to thank Perry and Bluebird Organizing for sponsoring this week's show. For CJ Vogel, I'm Jeff Howe. Thank you for watching. And until next time, welcome.